This is a Culture Inject production. The Nevers Podcast presents Firefly, Back in the Skies.
What are you going to tell the others?
About what?
About why I'm dead?
I hadn't thought about it.
Make something up. Don't tell them what I did.
The next time you decide to stab me in the back, have the guts to do it to my face.
Hello, welcome back, listeners, to our retrospective series Firefly, Back in the Skies. I'm Laura.
And I'm Taheg, and this week we're watching Ariel.
So a quick synopsis for this episode. Hard up for cash, Serenity takes on a job from Simon. Break into an Alliance hospital on Central World, Ariel, so that he can get a thorough diagnostic of River and the crew can loot the valuable stores of medicine. But River's pursuers are hot on their trail, and they receive some unexpected inside help. This aired originally on November 15th, 2002. Cast and crew, we've got the usual players with guest appearances from Jeff Ricketts, Dennis Cockrum and Tom Virtue. This episode was written by Jose Molina and directed by Alan Croker.
Some production history and a few interesting facts. Jeff Ricketts, who portrayed Hand of Blue #2 in this episode, also appeared in episodes of Buffy and Angel, playing Weatherby in Who Are You? And This Year's Girl, and Sacrifice and Sanctuary on Angel. He also appeared in The Train Job. Shepherd Book doesn't appear in this episode, making it the only episode in the series not to feature all 9 protagonists. I didn't notice the slightly kind of weak explanation for him not being there. Like, oh yeah, you could have stayed with Book on that retreat he had to go to that we didn't show because he was obviously busy and we just needed a quick way to write him out of this episode.
Yeah, it's like either he was busy or just like in watching the episode, it's kind of like, what would Book have done? Like, what would his role have been? Because this is like a this episode's basically like full-on heist movie, right? So I feel like he would have been on the sidelines, kind of not doing much anyway, so maybe they just gave him the day off.
Entirely possible, yeah. Although his absence does lead to one of the best lines in the episode, but we'll get to that when we're going through the plot and everything. So
starting to talk about the plot, the episode opens where we see Serenity heading to Ariel, a central world of the Union of Allied Planets. Anara is due for her annual companion physical exam and license renewal. Chatting in the common room, the crew discuss what they might do while there, but Mal enters to announce that no one's leaving the ship in order to minimise their visibility in this highly monitored bastion of the Alliance.
Yeah, I do really love that opening scene, because it's just... I don't know how he does it, but Joss just has this way of writing those kind of casual conversations so brilliantly. Like, they're talking nonsense, but like, it really feels like something that an actual group, like a lot of times when you get those sort of just hanging out with the guys type scenes, the conversation can seem quite forced, but the banter and the chemistry is so good in that opening scene. It really feels like a group of friends that have been through the frickin' wars, just relaxing in some downtime. And yeah, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it features one of my favourite lines in possibly the whole show, where, like, obviously Jane's complaining because that's sort of basically his role in the group. And he's like, oh, I should have gone with Book, his retreat. And he's like, yeah, you could have been meditating in a sort of monastery. And he's like, yeah, but it beats just sitting here. And Wash just gives him this look like, that's what it is. Like, that's meditation. What do you think it is? Oh. So good.
Yeah, I love that bit. And also just Wash like really trying to get his wife to come on a nice romantic walk with him.
Yeah.
She's just like, well, that sounds boring, because you know she's used to rough and toughing it around and a lot of action.
Yeah. And of course Jane is busy being 110% Jane, and when Jane makes some less than polite remarks about Simon, River just walks up and casually slashes him across the stomach with his massive carving knife. Jane knocks her out, and River casually defends her attack by saying Jane looks better in red, which, I mean, he kind of does, so you can't fault her, but it's probably a little
Yeah, I like this because they, while he's like sorting all his weapons out at the table, and he's like, they pay really close attention to like the knives and everything, and then obviously she comes over and slashes him because she's also paying very close attention to like what he's doing and like really assessing him. So then after that commotion, while Simon stitches Jane in the infirmary and attempts to apologise for River's actions, the mercenary refuses to listen and demands the doctor and his sister be left on Ariel. Mal squashes any talk of leaving people behind.
But still, after Jane leaves, Mal tells Simon to keep River confined to her room at all times, only allowed out with Mal's permission, and warns him that he'll have to revisit their arrangement if she isn't kept under control. He then sympathetically notes that she is getting worse. Simon quietly acknowledges it. Another really great, like, this episode opens really, really well. The first sort of 2 or 3 scenes are brilliant. I love the way, like, you know, Jane's like, oh, I've got to get off the ship. She's freaking crazy. She's a danger. And Mal's like, relax. She's part of the crew. Like, I've said she can stay here. She can stay here. Just get out. And then the moment he leaves, he's like, dude, Simon, you've got to watch out for your sister, man. Like, we had a deal here and you're not holding up your end. What are you doing? It's like, he will absolutely defend his crew to anyone that, even another member of his crew, that sort of try to talk down to them. But it really, he is a lot more worried than he seems. And it's very well played by, Mr. Fillion.
Yeah, I would say this is like a very Mal strong episode the whole way through. I'm kind of like, wow, Mal's a badass and like, what a captain. That's
For real.
Yeah, to like not be intimidated. Like he's not intimidated by the slightest by Jane, who's like, you know, towers over him a little and is this big guy. So while the crew then kills time playing horseshoes in the cargo hold, Wash and Jane lament the lack of work they've had in recent stops. Simon approaches them with a job, one that would pay out 10 times over.
His proposal? If they help him break into Ariel City's hospital so he can use the 3D neuroimager to analyse River's condition, he will show them how to raid the medical stores of the hospital for supplies that will net Serenity considerable wealth on the black market.
Kaylee expresses unease at the idea of stealing medicine from patients that will need them, but Zoe states that Alliance resources will allow the government-run hospital to rapidly replace whatever they take within hours, which Simon affirms. Mal adds that people in the Rim could really use the medicine. Wass asks how Simon plans to break into a highly secure Alliance facility and get around security. Around the mess hall table, Simon explains his plan. And then we get into the proper heist movie vibes.
Yeah, I was that was like, I was also getting really weird, not Resident Evil, getting really weird kind of Metal Gear Solid vibes from it. It was very like, okay, yeah, this is our plan, voiceovers, floodlights, breaking in. It was a really good, a lot of flashbacks to the good old days of Konami.
Jane says an interesting thing, actually, when they're talking about there being a lack of work, and he's like, oh, I don't think, he says something along the lines of, like, there's never a lack of work, or something like that. And I do think that's one of my things, when people are always like, there's not enough jobs around. I always think, I think there's plenty of jobs around, but there's a lot of jobs that a lot of people don't want to do, and those jobs remain unfilled. It's not necessarily a lack of jobs, but a lack of jobs that one might wish to do, which is probably similar to the verse here. Very
much so, yeah. Although I have to wonder how many jobs there are out there that they could do that Mal doesn't want to do because it would involve crossing lines he's not comfortable crossing. For instance, I mean, we already saw in the train heist that, the train job, that he was, you know, when he saw he was willing to rob the Alliance for those supplies, when he realized they were medicine, he immediately gave them back. But now, because he knows this is a core world, they're free to take the medicine because he knows, you know, thanks to Zoe and Simon, that anything they take will be back within maybe an hour. No one's gonna kind of feel the impact of that loss. Whereas, you know, out in the black, there's every chance that one missed vial could mean, you know, 5-10 people die. So it's interesting to see, like, Mal is not averse to stealing medicine. He's just averse to stealing medicine when it won't immediately be replaced and when the people that need it won't feel the loss. So it's just very kind of a distillation of Mal's character in one moment.
And then as we're around the table with Simon, I feel like it's a real moment for Simon because up until now, everything he's had, every kind of interaction, he's been very nervous. Like when he tried to take the lead before, very nervous, very shaky, not confident at all. But with this, he's like very like, because he needs to do this for River, right? And unless he explains everything clearly and takes the lead here, it's not going to get done right. So he's on it. Simon is on it in this episode.
Yeah, very much so. I think the standouts for this episode are definitely Mal and Simon. They both have like their real moment to shine, and it's great to see, because I think this is the most, Simon has the most dialogue in this episode that has in any episode. Like, this is his moment to shine, and he absolutely nails it. Speaking of, as Simon is presenting his plan in sort of epic heist-style voiceover, Jane is shown securing the identification, keycards and uniforms. Kaylee and Wash raid a local junkyard and find an ambulance shuttle in repairable condition, and Mal, Zoe and Jane struggle hilariously and ineptly to recite prepared medical assessments for their rushed entrance into the emergency ward. Meanwhile, Simon gently coaxes River into complying with his plan. I love that little kind of montage thing of them trying. It's classic sort of 80s style, getting a little bit better with everything. All it was missing was some inspirational power chords playing in the background. Them really trying to learn their lines, and it's just like, oh, you are all so bad at this. But it's just hilarious.
I love, Jane. If I'd wanted schooling, I'd have gone to school. It's just,
peak Jane.
Yeah, brilliant. But he looks like he's really trying, or is at least, trying as best as he can.
Yeah.
And I think that Mal and Zoe are kind of getting this, like, newfound respect for Simon. And that, like, he's not just, like, on the outside, some shiny doctor from, like, the Central Planets. He knows his stuff. He's a genius, right? He's a very, very, very good doctor. And now them trying to learn just some of the words, they're like, damn, this is difficult.
Like, he may not be very good at in the realms of, shooting and looting, but in his element, he is really quite exceptional.
Yeah. I wanted to know, I found, when I was in the junkyard, I felt really, like, out of it for a moment, because it's, like, the only scene through the series so far where it's, like, really blatantly in a studio with, like, screens in the back.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it pushed me really out. I was just kind of like, oh, they're just kind of like in a junkyard studio. I was like, because up until then, I feel like they've done a really good job in like immersing you, even with like, old style CGI and everything. Yeah. I feel like that was the first shot where I was kind of like, oh, you can really tell it's in a studio.
It is all a little bit immersion breaking.
Yeah, because when they're in the ship, because the ship is like real 99% of the time, they're in it and that's their set. It's great because it's real. They're really there. And then when it's all like CGI in space, you're like, well, that's fine because, that's all CG, but it looks fine. But yeah, this was the first moment where they're like on a set where you can like really tell it's not real.
Yeah. I think it kind of bugged me. It's all just a little bit too clean. It's kind of very kind of artfully dirty, but you can tell it's not actual stuff that's been dumped. Do you remember a show from back in the 90s? I'm sure someone out there in the verse will remember, called Scrap Heap Challenge.
I was just going to say, you're going to say Scrap Heap Challenge.
I am going to say it's one of the best shows. I really wish they'd bring it back. Basically, for those out there that haven't seen it, because they're younger than 30, 2 teams of kind of 5 jobbers that think they can build things were dumped in a heavy air quotes scrap heap and tasked to build like a car or a boat or some kind of random contraption out of only things they could salvage from this scrap heap and then kind of bodge it together into a working machine. Brilliant series, great concept. But like, they're like, okay, we've got to build a hot air balloon, and they'd be looking through like wrecked cars and open up the boot. And there'd be like this perfectly folded aircraft grade aluminum wrap that you could just happen to use for a sort of air balloon. And it's like, it's so obviously sort of all set up and planted to make sure there's all the bits they need to make whatever it is they have to make within this. Like, oh yeah, we've got to make a crane, and there'll be like 30 different kinds of hydraulic ram just to make sure they've got one that will fit their build. And like, that was just, I could get major flashbacks from that watching this scene. 'Cause it's like, yes, that's obviously a scrappy, but like, everything's sorted into neat piles. Like, oh yes, here's a big jar full of all the different hydraulic bits you'll need, so that Kaylee can kind of pick through it and find the one. Oh, look what I found. Yeah, and we need this. And it's like, of course you did. It's right there in front of you. And then they just happen to stumble across an almost entirely complete ambulance that just needs a coat of paint to get it working. It's like, in a show that's really kind of surprisingly down to earth for a sci-fi series, it does really take you out of the feeling a bit when like it's all so clearly just been handed to them on a platter.
Yeah, I think this is the most far-fetched kind of bit of the, funnily enough, of the show that's set in space with space bandits and such. This is the most far-fetched because I'm like, oh yeah, look at that, like a helicopter that's like basically, it just happens to be there, but it looks like it's got no parts in it, and they're going to completely make this helicopter in what seems like, through the montage, a very short amount of time. I don't know if it's referenced like exactly how long they're actually parked on Ariel while Anara's off doing her thing, but seems like it happens very quickly, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, here we go.
If it was more than like 2 or 3 days, I'd be very surprised.
Although River is terrified of another comatose trip, her brother calms her with the promise of a diagnosis that will help him dispel her nightmares. He then injects her and then himself with a drug designed to send the user into a death-like state. So obviously this is scary for River, because this is how she came onto the ship, right? This is how this is how he got her out of the first facility and into a safe place. And now it feels like he's taken her back into a not safe place, and she'll be in no control over it because she's going to be unconscious.
Yeah, the kind of the, not quite just juxtaposition, but sort of the symmetry of her escape against this. You can tell why she would be a little bit upset by it. And like, it's one of the rare times when you're like, you know what, actually, River, you're probably right to be freaking out a little bit right now. I would be just as upset as you are in this situation. So you really have to feel for her there, because there's got to be some really bad memories associated with going to sleep and then waking up somewhere scary.
And the one line I like is, Simon says, the others will keep us safe. And then River's like, no. And it's, well, like, she must know, like, that Jane's gonna, like, cross them.
Yeah, this is definitely a very prescient episode for River. She makes a lot of, like, she's always kind of quite good at predicting what's going to happen next. But this episode, it feels like everything she says is a reference to something that's going to happen later on. It's kind of freaky. I suppose kind of a heightened emotional state is making her powers more active or something, but who knows. As Wash transports the team via the shuttle to the hospital, Mal voices concerns about how Jane may handle himself with Simon after what occurred with River. Jane begrudgingly admits that Simon's plan is good and shrugs off revenge with a joke about giving the comatose Simon a tattoo. Once landed, Wash waits with the shuttle while the other EMTs rush into emergency with their victims. But as they start their prepared spiel, the admitting nurse absently directs them to the morgue. Mal and Zoe recover quickly with surprising ease to this hurdle, but Jane, unable to adapt as quickly, nearly ruins their smooth entry by spouting his now irrelevant line anyway. Such a good... Also, I would note, I'm only about 50% sure that was actually a joke when he was talking about giving Simon a tattoo. I wouldn't have at all been surprised if Simon had woken up with some new ink, possibly something rude tattooed on his forehead. But yeah, I just love that. Like, they've been practicing so hard. All right, we're gonna get this right. We're gonna memorize our lines. We're gonna do this. And they walk into the hospital, and then the admitting nurse is just like, yeah, it's fine. Their bodies, just put them in. I do not care. I have far more important things to worry about. Just get them out of here. And they're just like, oh, I wanted to say my line. It goes back to, like, the difference in their backgrounds. Like, Mal and Zoe, they're military trained. They understand how to roll with the punches. Meanwhile, Jane is just sort of a bit of a drifter. Is used to kind of doing whatever he feels like. It's like, you kind of see that, like, things aren't going to pan. And so he just spouts his line because I've got to do my part.
So then in the morgue, Mal starts the revival process for Simon and River, then departs with Zoe for the medical vault. Unsupervised, Jane wanders off to make a surreptitious call to an Alliance officer, who agrees to pay a previously arranged reward for the fugitives. Jane returns to the unconscious Tams with the doctor's uniform and patient's gown. I don't know, seeing someone like Jane, like, just so willingly call the police is kind of just like, really?
But I think the important part isn't that Jane called the police. The important part is when he hands them over, they're like, yes, you're now a very rich man. There's a lot of things Jane won't do. There's very little things Jane won't do for a massive stack of money.
Are you aware of what River says when she sits up? And on the subtitles, it said copper for a kiss, but it sounded like she said copper for hay or something like that. And I wasn't sure what, if it was relevant to anything, what she says when she sits up and says that to Jane, but.
I thought it was a, reference to the Guy Fawkes, where they used like penny for the guy type thing, but,
yeah.
So, dressed in the uniform, Simon now pushes River in a wheelchair towards the diagnostic ward with EMT Jane accompanying them. As they pass through the post-op ward, River insists that her brother helped a man she believes is being killed by his doctor. When a code blue sounds, Simon dashes over to the patient, quickly assessing the problem, and revives the man with a defibrillator before stabilizing him. Simon berates the doctor for the improper treatment before returning to the task at hand. River beams at her brother, and Jane looks quite impressed himself. He was not the only one. I was also suitably impressed by that. Like, up till now, we've seen Simon in a number of situations which he's either incredibly unsuited for or just mildly unsuited for. We haven't really seen him in his element, but now kind of striding through the ward like Dr. House, he's like, this person's had bad things done to them. We need to do this and it'll fix them because you're an idiot. So you really kind of see what he's given up to save his sister. Like, he could have been running that hospital by now, but he's not, because he's got to go on the run because the Alliance suck, basically.
Yeah, and River's like really obviously feels bad for him because it's her fault, essentially, or that's at least how she feels, that he's not there doing that. And you can see like how proud she is of him, like looking on and seeing him do his thing, because he's really in his element. And yeah, it's nice for him to have moments, but obviously it's very risky in their current situation. Just a bit,
yeah. Drawing attention to yourself isn't really the thing to do when you're in the middle of a heist.
Yes. So, meanwhile, Mal and Zoe on their way to the supplies room are intercepted by a doctor who questions Mal. When the doctor starts into a tirade over what he feels is Mal's insubordination, Zoe incapacitates the man with a jolt from a wall-mounted defibrillator. They use one of the transport coffins to conceal the unconscious doctor en route to the medical vault. His keycard is used to enter the vault. Laying him out on the floor inside the vault, Mal and Zoe quickly collect everything they can find from Simon's prepared list, storing it in the coffins. This is just a lovely, funny little thing with them, because it's like, I don't know, they're trying to be really sneaky, but they honestly don't know what to say.
Yeah. This guy's kind of all puffed up with his own self-importance, like, do you know who I am? When I do this, when I say jump, you say how high, and they're just like, we don't even work here, dude. You're literally never going to see us again after today. Leave us alone, please. In the diagnostic ward, Simon puts River under the 3D neuroimager and isolates the brain. During the scan, he discovers her brain has been surgically operated on several times, to his utter horror. According to Simon, her amygdala has been stripped, disabling her ability to suppress her emotions. She feels everything. She can't not, he paraphrases. This was a serious scene. This was probably the biggest scene of the whole episode. Like, you can skip out 90% of the rest of the episode, but you absolutely have to watch this scene, because this is where we really discover exactly what's wrong, in air quotes, with River. Like, we realize exactly what's going on with her and why she is the way she is. And this is also the moment you can see that Jane realizes he's screwed up and decides he has to help these two. When he realizes what has happened to River and why she is the way she is, you can see he's just like, oh man, I feel really bad now for fucking these guys over. I should probably try and get them out. And it's a very important scene for River, very important for Jane, fairly important for Simon.
In watching it, I don't know what the 100% if it's easy to tell, because for me I thought, that's a turning point. He sees that she's really suffering and regrets his decision and quickly gets them out to try and evade the police that he's just called. Or is it that was the original plan, was to get them out quicker, to take them to the police? Like, do you think he was trying to get them out and he changed his mind? Or he was actually still leading them to the police? Because they obviously go straight to the police. But I feel like when I originally watched it, and then when I watched it again, I was like, he's changing his mind. He's going to help them. But then, no, he takes them straight to the police. Okay.
But we have to assume they have every exit covered. He thought they were going to a particular point, but they had the whole hospital circled. So he probably thought he was taking them to safety and then got screwed over twice.
Yeah, because for someone like Jane, you see it like in his face, like when Simon's talking about what they've done to her, and he's like, she's not just some crazy chick. She's been traumatized by these people, and he's about to hand her back to them.
Exactly.
And that's, maybe that's his line. How Mao's line is much further down for the things he's willing to do. That this is Jane's line, handing someone not just over to the police to be like arrested, but to be experimented on and have their skull cut open repeatedly again.
Yeah.
So then we see Jane claiming a sudden change of plans. He leads them away from the diagnostic ward to a rear entrance. While he and Simon argue, River shrieks and starts to babble in fear. The three are then stopped by federal marshals, who arrest and handcuff Jane. Jane first thinks it's for show, but quickly learns that the Alliance officer plans to reward him not with cash, but with an arrest for aiding and abetting the fugitive siblings, keeping the reward money for himself. Who would have thought that would happen?
Yeah.
Oh my days.
Top 10 all-time anime betrayals. No, yeah, I mean, he can't have been surprised the Alliance turned out to screw him over. That is literally what the Alliance do. He is himself a fugitive. People in law enforcement don't hand reward money to fugitives. They arrest more fugitives and get more reward money for themselves.
I like, at the moment that it's happening, like her brain goes crazy, like it lights up really red or whatever, because she knows that they're coming and that shit's about to go bad. That
was a really nice little touch. You can see like her brain just absolutely goes into overdrive. Like, bad things are happening. Get me out now.
Yeah. And it's never one of those things that's like subtle. Like, it happens for like a split second and neither Simon nor Jane are like, oh my God, her brain's going crazy. Like, something bad must be happening. Which a lot of other shows would do, you know?
Yeah. While they're being arrested, Mal and Zoe return to the shuttle with the pharmacological loot, but soon realise that Jane and Tams are late. Kaylee discovers some unusual Alliance radio chatter, which Zoe recognises as code, suggesting the second team has been captured. The two war veterans head back into the hospital to rescue their people, directed by Kaylee's analysis of the hospital floor plan, and then Wash announces the arrival of reinforcements. Bum bum bum. I've got to say, like, the ships in this show tend to be quite sort of realistic looking. They look like they could be, like, advancements of the basic warship technology that's around now. But when the super slick, all black stealth cruiser arrived, it's like, oh yeah, this, you can tell this is like the peak of the technology of this era. Like, that is as good as ships get. Like, that's when you know someone really dangerous has arrived.
Yeah, and I like, again, the split of, like, I think it's Wash, isn't it? Is like, you can't, what do you mean go back in there? You can't go back in there. Like, it kind of goes against everything Mal and Zoe are, like, putting themselves in danger of the Alliance.
Yeah.
And they're about to rush back in to save Simon, River, and Jane. But, yeah. So, as they're held in security substation, Simon thanks Jane for his struggle with the feds, unaware that his shipmate sold him out. River's babbling piques the feds, who soon move the captives to a holding area awaiting transfer to an unknown party. Handcuffed, Jane and Simon attack their escorts, managing to kill one and knock the other unconscious.
As they argue which way to go, River announces that it doesn't matter. They're here. Back in the substation, the two blue-gloved men arrive to take the fugitives. The agents taken up a mysterious sonic device. Within seconds, the feds are bleeding from every orifice and quickly collapse dead. Unaffected by the device, the agents go to retrieve River themselves. Confession time. First time I watched this episode, I was much younger. And as they're getting everything ready, I was like, wow, their hands are blue. Are they aliens? Do they have some kind of genetic advancement? No, they're just wearing gloves. I don't know how I missed that the first time round. Like, they're clearly just wearing medical gloves. I don't know why I thought they were like space aliens with blue hands or something. But yeah.
But they are very, I mean, we still have the question of, like, who and what are they? Because they're like very, they have seem to have no emotion. It's like, are they people that have been experimented on like River has, but they've had all of their feelings and guilt and whatever else taken out so that they can do stuff like this. And also they've been obviously genetically or somehow enhanced to not be affected by this blue bar thing that kills everybody. Freaky
sonic weapon. I was wondering if they're kind of the original form of what turned out to be the operative in the movie. Like, are they the absolute peak of Alliance special forces? Kind of seems to fit with what they're doing, but Yeah, I'm not sure. I seem to recall hearing that those two were actually added at Fox's insistence. Like, Fox was like, we need to add some kind of visible enemy. So, just like, fine, I'll write in some creepy government agents.
Yeah, I guess because, a lot of the time, obviously they only make a couple of appearances in the show. A lot of the time they're just talking about being captured by the Alliance. And, I mean, I'm quite happy to not have a visual representation of that. We know who they are. We know what they are.
Indeed.
And then obviously I was thinking to myself, for the film, I was like, at the moment of watching this, I'm thinking, oh, that blue bar, it's not very easy to escape. Like, they get in a room with you and, like, if that activates before you get a chance to shoot them, like, Mal and his crew would be screwed fighting against this. Whereas fighting against a guy with a sword, like, at least, you know, there's a fight and it's more kind of entertaining, and he's a great character, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh yeah, they wouldn't have really carried over well into the film. So several rooms away, Jane and the Tams hear screaming of all those men that are dying, and a terrified River runs in the direction opposite the security station. Jane and Simon follow River's flight until they reach a locked door. As Jane fruitlessly tries to open it, the lock is blasted from the other side by Mal and Zoe. By the time the Blue Gloves arrive, the group has already left. They made their swift escape.
Yes, thank God. Always makes me laugh. They've got this super advanced high-tech guns, and he tries to shoot the door, and he's like, "This is useless to me!" And freaking Alliance, everything they do is so kind of sanitized. Of course, even their weapons would be sanitized.
Yeah, and then he just has to try and use the gun as a hammer, because everything is a hammer. Everything is a hammer. I don't know, I think with Jane, he has this look of like, yay, like, Mal and Zoe are here, but also, I'm about to get in the real shit if they realise what I've done.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that obviously carries through into the end.
Inara returns to Serenity to find everyone but Kaylee absent. She gives Inara a summary of events just as the shuttle returns with all hands aboard. Simon raves about Jane's heroism during the escape. Mal tells Wash to leave the planet as soon as possible and has Jane stay to help him unload the new cargo. Once everyone has left the cargo hold, Mal suddenly bashes Jane unconscious with a wrench. I'm actually quite glad this happened straight away. It was very much like betrayal, rescue, sort of summation. Like, if they'd dragged it on for like 2 or 3 episodes, I think it could have gotten a bit, like, with Jane being all kind of on edge and Mal being all like, I know, but I'm not going to hit you yet. It would have gotten old quite quickly. I'm quite glad it was just like straight away resolution before the end of the episode, because it is something that definitely needs to be addressed ASAP.
Yeah, and again, this comes back to my Mal is a badass type thing, because he's like, there's a situation he's dealing with and dealing with it.
Exactly.
He's like that with everything apart from the Inara situation.
Everyone's got to have one weakness.
One weakness, Inara. Yeah, and then obviously the whole spiel that, like, Simon... Because obviously Simon's had a real distaste for Jane the entire time they've been on board, because Jane's not been very nice. But for Simon to be standing there, like, singing his praises, and you can see how uncomfortable Jane is, and it's just like, oh, man. And I love through the whole thing as well, Mal is, like, giving that look, you know? Everybody else is, like, happy and blah, 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 but Jane is like, Mal is like, yeah, amazing. Like, what a hero type thing.
Yeah, it's clear he's like, I know something you don't know.
Yeah, but Jane's not quite kind of picked up on it.
Shocker. Not
quite, yeah. So, obviously when he gets hit with a wrench, that's quite a surprise to him. And after said event, he wakes up to find himself in the hold airlock with a radio on the floor and Mal holding another on the other side of the inner door. Mal cracks the outer door open to the quickly thinning atmosphere as the ship leaves Ariel. Mal states that Simon's plan was sound and there was no reason for them to run into trouble. They did, unless, having no good reason to be around the back exit that Mal and Zoe found them at, it was Jane who'd called the feds.
Jane fails to convince Mal of his innocence, and with the auto warning that space is 2 minutes away, confesses that he betrayed Simon and River. He tries to justify that it was not Mal he wrongs, but Mal considers betrayal against any of his crew to be the same as betraying Mal, and as such, Jane has no place with them anymore.
And seeing that Jane cannot seem to comprehend that, Mal turns to leave. When Jane asks Mal not to tell his shipmates the truth about his betrayal, showing that he does at least care about the memory he'd leave behind with the others, Mal relents and remotely closes the door, the outer door. He warns Jane that if he does decide to betray Mal again, to at least have the guts to do it to his face and leaves Jane stuck in the airlock. And again, you know, Mal is a badass.
He is, yeah. This is a great scene for both Mal and Jane. Like, this was probably the two of the best performances those two characters have in the entirety of the series, is that one scene. Like, it's both actors at their absolute peak.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, and I was also thinking it's funny because in that scene, obviously Jane, we're seeing through the pivotal end bit anyway, when he leaves the walkie-talkie on the window. Jane we're only seeing through this little window, and Mal we're not really seeing at all. He's holding the thing kind of over his face, the portion that we can see. And I'm thinking, what performance these guys are giving, and we can't even like see either of them properly. Yeah, it was very good.
And I really do think that it's all Jane's sort of protests that he did the right thing and it was just a mistake and yada yada yada. That all kind of falls on deaf ears. It's when he leaves and he's like, yeah, don't tell him about my betrayal. It's that last kind of honest confession from Jane that really is what kind of thaws Mal's heart. He's like, I think that's when he really kind of understands that while he may show it in a strange way, Jane does care about the crew and he does care what they think about him. And I do think that if we'd had more of the show, this would have been the turning point where Jane starts to be less Jane going forwards. This would have been the start of his redemption arc. Kind of, this is rock bottom for him. And from here, the only way is up. Hopefully. Yeah,
I was gonna say something similar, because if Jane cares that much about what the crew think about him, then it must mean that deep down he does care about the crew.
Indeed.
So yeah, it would be nice to see him evolve a bit more and become more of a loving member of the crew, even if he remains stupid and and ape-like.
Yeah, I mean, he's still going to be Jane, but he'll hopefully be a slightly nicer Jane.
Just a Jane that won't betray people for money.
Exactly. The episode comes to a close with Simon visiting River in her room with a fairly scary looking syringe. She's colouring in an illustration she made of a set of Matryoshka dolls. She asks sadly, "Is it time to go to sleep again?" As he prepares the injection, Simon takes her hand gently and responds hopefully, "No, May, it's time to wake up."
Oh, it's so cute.
Great last line. What a way to close the show. Dollhouse reference and a great one-liner. Can't ask for more than that.
Yeah, I think it's that exciting leading into like, oh, what will become of River if she's helped in a way that she can be stable and use these abilities, like to be a badass member of this crew, you know? But yeah, is the Matryoshka dolls, do we think that they're kind of like a symbol of anything? Because that's kind of like finding like your inner self, or like if like her real self is like trapped somewhere within her and it's time for it to like wake up, you know?
Yeah, because kind of the imagery of people having other worlds stored within themselves. Like everyone has something inside them that they can bring out when they have, like Jane, you know, on the outside he's this horrible person, then you go inside and like maybe he's a little bit better than you think, and you go inside and maybe actually he's a little bit worse than you think, but then deep in his core he's actually quite nice. Like everyone has layers, like an onion.
Yeah, like an onion.
It's harder to colour in an onion, so they made it a Matryoshka doll.
Yeah, I mean, overall great episode, I think. Especially if you're into, like, heist things.
Yeah, this is where I have to share a possibly slightly controversial opinion. I wouldn't say this was a bad episode, but I do think it was a bad episode for Firefly. Like, when I'm listing my favourite episodes, I would say this and Heart of Gold are probably right at the bottom. Like, every other episode has some cool thing that makes it really stand out for me. Like, you know, you've got like, Janestown with the Mudders and, you know, cool songs. You've got Shindig, which is just like an iconic episode. The opening two-parter sets everything up. Like, every episode has some part that makes you think like, oh yeah, that was great because of this. And then you get Ariel, and like, it's a great heist episode, but I think in the grand scheme, like if we'd had, you know, 3 or 4 seasons and we were looking back, this episode would very much be seen as not quite a filler episode, but this wouldn't be held up as like one of the episodes where everything was different afterwards. Like, it seeds a few plot lines, but they never really, like, yeah, this may have been the start of Jane's redemption arc. This may have been the start of River becoming kind of a more stable, productive member of the team. But because we have nothing, we don't really see the end of those arcs. It just feels like this is an episode where nothing really happens. Like, there's some cool scenes, there's some good lines, but there's nothing like, if I had to sit down and pick one episode of Firefly to watch, it would never be Ariel. I would only ever watch it as I was watching through the whole series.
Yeah, I get what you mean in the grand scheme of things, rewatching Firefly as it is now, you could skip it and it wouldn't make any difference to the show. Like the show's arc. When I'm thinking of all the episodes, like when I think of Firefly as a whole and I think of like key things, not necessarily episodes, but like key moments, I think like, I guess, what's the name of the episode? Trash. With Saffron comes back. That's one for me that I feel like, thinking of it now, having not watched the show for a couple of years, other than knowing in my head that it's like a job that Mal is helping Saffron with, I'm kind of like, I don't remember anything notable from that episode, from my memory. Whereas Ariel, I always think of, because I'm like, oh, that's the episode with, like, Jane's big betrayal. So for me, like, as a big point, I remember that point the same way I remember, like, oh, that time that Mal gets married. Or, you know, like, big points like that. Oh, the time that the Tams get kidnapped, yeah. Like, as a moment, as, not necessarily as an episode. But like, just as an episode on its own to watch it, it's enjoyable. It's a good, you know, it's not a bad episode of TV, right?
Yeah, that's the thing. Like I said, it's not a bad episode by any stretch of the imagination. Like, even Firefly at its absolute worst is still 2 or 3 rungs above the majority of other television out there.
For sure,
I just feel like it's a solid episode, some good scenes, but I don't know, it's not an episode I would ever think, oh, I want to sit down and watch Ariel. And actually, now you mentioned it, Trash, I think, is another episode that would go on that list. Like, with such a limited number of episodes, it feels like every episode needs to have, like, a really amazing hook. And this episode just doesn't really have it. Like, yeah, Jane's big betrayal would be a big thing if there was really any fallout from it in any other episode. But really, if you just drop this episode, you wouldn't notice that there was his big betrayal, because it's not referenced again in any other episode. There was no build-up to it in the previous episodes, except the general build-up of Jane being very Jane. And there's never really any fallout from it. Like, Mal never treats him any differently after this, because Mal being Mal, he's like, well, he screwed up, but he's, you know, he's honestly sort of, sorry for doing it, and he's trying to make amends, so I'll just, you know, let it go.
I think in terms of, like, if I was going to sit down and watch an episode, it's going to be Jamestown or, I guess it used to be Al Mrs. Reynolds. I would watch that one a lot as well.
Shindig. Love Shindig.
And Shindig, yeah. And then, like, now we have the movie, like, you know, if you just want a short burst of Firefly action, you can watch Serenity.
Indeed. Great film.
It's nice how they keep, I mean, again, I saw Serenity first, the movie. But going back and watching the show and watching the film again, like, it's nice how in a film they keep such a nice sense of, like it's really grounded. Yeah. Very
much so. Like, I'm saying I saw the film first and then went back and watched the series. And I saw the film and I really enjoyed it. I liked, you know, the Whedon-esque banter, and there's some good fights, and Chiwetel Ejiofor is a fantastic antagonist. But then I went back and I watched the series and I watched the film again, and I'm like, oh man, this hits so much harder now. This was so good. I love this film so much.
I think Serenity, spoilers for anyone that's not watched Serenity yet, the movie. I'm watching it the first time without watching Firefly. Like, when you lose Book, it's like, oh, okay, we just met him. I don't really know this guy. It's not really like a big deal. And then you lose Wash, who you've watched in the whole film, and is Alan Tudyk, and if you've seen him in other things like, you know, Dodgeball and whatever, you're like, oh, that guy's great, and like, oh, he's a really great character just from this film, and he's this really great character, and you lose him and you're like really gutted, like when you lose Wash, like even if you've never watched Firefly. And then you go back and you watch Firefly and you really connect to these characters, and you come back and watch Serenity and you're like, oh god, oh no.
Yep.
You're just like, oh, this is some, you know, person that they used to know who's like gone and settled here now, and he seems very, like, old and wise, and he's like their conscience still kind of thing, but then you lose him so quickly, and you, like, feel bad, obviously, because they've, like, taken them in.
Yeah.
But, yeah, and then you learn of Shepherd Book, but... So, favourite lines and stuff from this episode, anyway, I'd have to go with Zoe. Probably just, it's not even a line, it's one word. Zoe's clear. Because it's just, like, she's so great.
It's like, the delivery is so good. She's like, actually, I had a few from this one. Washes, it's all very sweet, stealing from the rich and selling to the poor. Come on, Wash.
So good.
Yeah, then later on, when Simon's doing his big kind of, explaining the plan to everyone, his big sort of heist monologue. And Simon, for this plan to work, River and I will have to be dead. And then you see Jane's ears perk up. I'm starting to like this plan. Come on, Jane. Can you not be Jane for 5 freaking minutes? And then actually on the same path, when they're kind of flying in and, they're sort of, are you going to be okay with Simon, etc. When Jane's like, as long as I get paid, I'm happy. Like, a simple line, but just the amount of foreshadowing in that line is phenomenal. Like, watching this episode through a second, third, 17th time, it's like, you just realize what he's actually talking about there. And it's like, oh man, that line has layers.
Yep.
And then the last one is one of the most iconic lines, right up there with my pretty floral bonnet, I will end you, for me. Is, next time you stab me in the back, have the guts to do it to my face. Like,
oh my God,
that's
yeah.
such a Mal line. Everything about it was condensed into one line. Like, if you're going to betray me, do it. It's a great kind of, counterbalance to his point earlier, in the pilot, I think, when he's talking to Simon, and I'm like, how do I know you won't shoot me in my back? It's like, if I shoot you in your back, it'll be to your face. Like, he gives everyone else that sort of respect. Like, if he's going to kill you, he'll be facing you. And then, like, all he's asking is for that respect to be returned. And it upsets him when it isn't, but.
Yeah. And I guess that's just like the loyalty and the trust that you gain from being part of a squad, I guess, in like the military. And like having someone like Zoe, who is so loyal, and like the relationship between them, and then he expects that from his whole crew. He gives that to all of his crew. Same as giving it to Simon and River, who's, joined and brought this whole load of trouble. It's like, he doesn't care. They're his crew. He won't get rid of them because he's entered in this agreement. And that agreement is that you trust each other and you don't do each other dirty. Damn you, Jane.
Don't sell him out to the freaking feds, Jane.
Yeah.
Okay. Next week, the synopsis for next week's episode is the awesome War Stories. Fantastic episode. Angered at Zoe's unshakable war connection to Mal, Wash demands a shot at a field assignment. Unfortunately, he's terrible, and the crime lord Nishka chooses this moment to exact a brutal revenge for Mal's failure to complete an earlier job. Oh, great episode.
Yeah, because I feel like this is, not only is it a good look for certain characters that haven't kind of shone yet, but it's also a recurring character. It's putting us back to something that's happened before, whereas a lot of the episodes you can kind of standalone and don't necessarily refer to a previous episode or anything that's happened before. So yeah, this is a very good episode.
It's the spectre of continuity rearing its head for, I think, kind of the first time.
We'll get onto War Stories next time, and thank you for listening. So we'll see you next time on Firefly Back in the Skies.